The studio was hushed, the kind of silence that makes the sound of shuffling notes echo like thunder. A small set had been arranged, two sleek armchairs facing each other, a low table between them with two glasses of water, and the warm but subdued glow of the spotlights giving the scene an almost theatrical air. There was no audience, no applause. This was not about spectacle. It was about questions and answers. Norah O'Donnell entered first, carrying her signature calm aura. She was poised, polished, and welcoming, a journalist known for balancing empathy with precision. Meghan followed moments later, gliding into her seat with a confidence that bordered on regal. Her expression was neutral, almost rehearsed, as if every camera angle had already been calculated. "Meghan, thank you for being here," Norah began warmly, her tone soft but professional. "I know your time is precious, and I appreciate you sitting down with us tonight." Meghan gave a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Well, I think the world deserves to hear the truth, don't you?" she replied, her voice carrying a subtle edge. Norah nodded gently, choosing not to acknowledge the slight undertone. "Of course. And that's exactly what we're here to do. Shed light on your journey, your challenges, and your hopes moving forward." At first, the questions were simple. Meghan spoke about her recent projects, her foundation, her carefully framed vision of empowerment. She leaned back slightly in her chair, hands folded elegantly, as though she were giving a keynote speech rather than answering questions. But Norah was experienced enough to know when someone was performing. She adjusted her notes, her tone remaining warm, but her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "Meghan, there's been a lot of discussion about how your life has changed since stepping away from the royal family. How are you finding life in America, away from that world?" Meghan tilted her head. "Life in America?" She let out a short, humorless laugh. "Let's just say it's refreshing to finally be in a place where I don't have to bow to anyone." Norah blinked. It wasn't the answer she expected, or perhaps it was exactly what she feared. Still, she pressed on, her smile intact. "And your husband, Harry, how has he adjusted to this new chapter?" Meghan's lips curved into something closer to a smirk. "Harry's doing fine. Better than fine, actually. He's learning what it means to live like a free man, not chained to centuries of outdated rituals. It's liberating. For both of us." There was a pause, the kind of pause that thickened the air. Norah made a quick note on her paper before continuing. "Some have wondered if there's been any tension," Norah asked carefully, "between you two as you navigate this transition. Public life can be—" Meghan cut her off with a sharp laugh. "Tension? Please, people always want to imagine drama where there isn't any. Harry and I are stronger than ever. If anything, the only tension comes from the outside, from people who just can't stand to see us happy." Her words were smooth, but her tone was brittle, defensive. The audience at home wouldn't see it yet, but Norah could feel the wall going up, brick by brick. Wanting to move delicately, Norah tried another angle. "You've often been compared in the media to the Princess of Wales, Catherine. Do you ever feel pressure from those comparisons?" Meghan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She gave a long pause before answering, her eyes flicking up as if weighing how much venom to release. "Pressure? Number. I don't feel pressure. I feel annoyance. Imagine constantly being measured against someone simply because of who you married. Kate this, Kate that. It's laughable, really." The words landed heavy in the room. Norah kept her expression neutral, but there was a flicker in her eyes, the first sign that the interview was shifting. "And your children," Norah said softly, attempting to pivot to gentler ground. "They've been in the spotlight, even when you've tried to shield them. How do you navigate that as a mother?" Meghan leaned forward now, her eyes narrowing slightly. "My children are off limits. The fact that people even think they're entitled to ask about them says a lot about society's obsession with invading privacy. Maybe journalists should focus less on kids and more on actual issues." Norah swallowed her poise unbroken, but she felt the sting. The temperature in the room seemed to dip. The first cracks were beginning to show. The air in the studio had thickened. What began as polite conversation now pulsed with something sharp and uneasy. The lights above hummed faintly, casting soft shadows across Meghan's face. Her expression composed, but her eyes carrying that unmistakable glint of irritation that every experienced interviewer recognizes. Norah adjusted her posture, maintaining her calm. She had handled senators, CEOs, and foreign leaders. Yet there was something uniquely challenging about this guest, a sense of entitlement wrapped in charm, a performance so polished it almost dared her to break it. She smiled faintly and leaned forward. "Let's talk about your Netflix partnership." There have been reports suggesting you and Harry were in discussions for a new season, and that there were disagreements about compensation. Can you tell us what's really going on? Meghan let out a short, airy laugh, the kind that sounds polite but isn't. Reports? You mean rumors? I find it fascinating that the media spends so much time speculating about numbers when they should be focusing on the message. Norah nodded slowly. So you're saying the reports are untrue? I'm saying, Meghan replied crisply, that whatever discussions my team and I have are private. It's funny though, people assume that just because I've been in the public eye, they're entitled to know every financial detail of my life. That's not journalism, Norah. That's gossip. Words landed with quiet weight. Norah's expression didn't change, but she inhaled slowly through her nose. She could sense it now. This wasn't going to be one of those calm, diplomatic interviews that quietly fade into the archives. This was turning into a sparring match. I understand your point, Norah said evenly, but surely when you and Prince Harry signed one of the most publicized entertainment deals in recent history, you expected a certain level of scrutiny. Meghan's eyes flashed. Scrutiny or obsession? There's a difference. And let's be honest, if my name weren't Meghan Markle, nobody would care. But the moment a woman speaks up, suddenly she's difficult, demanding, or greedy. Her voice carried a rehearsed indignation that sounded almost theatrical. Norah folded her hands, her professionalism holding firm, but the tension between them was visible now. Thin, stretched, about to snap. Speaking of the public, Norah continued gently, you've often said you value your privacy deeply, yet your projects, from the docuseries to your memoir, invite the public into very personal aspects of your life. Some have suggested that's contradictory. How do you respond to that? Meghan exhaled sharply through her nose, her smile now tight. I think that's a lazy criticism. Sharing my truth isn't the same as surrendering my privacy. People seem to struggle with that concept. Perhaps they prefer their women silent. Norah's pen froze above her notebook. That last line wasn't just defensive, it was accusatory. She looked up, her calm mask beginning to show strain. No one here is asking you to be silent, Meghan. I'm simply asking how you draw that line. The line, Meghan said coolly, is mine to draw. A silence followed, thick, uncomfortable, charged. Norah could feel it pressing in, the atmosphere shifting from conversation to confrontation. Still, she pressed forward, her journalistic instincts refusing to yield. You've spoken before about the institution of the monarchy and the challenges you faced. Looking back now, do you have any regrets about how you handled your departure? Meghan's laugh was dry, almost mocking. Regrets? None. I chose peace over performance. I chose authenticity over servitude. Frankly, I think I should be applauded for walking away from a system that thrives on silence and submission. Norah tilted her head slightly. Some might say that system also gave you the platform that allows you to speak today. That did it. Meghan's posture stiffened, her expression sharpened. The warmth she'd managed to maintain for the cameras began to vanish entirely. Oh, so now we're giving credit to the institution for my voice? Interesting. You think I owe my visibility to the monarchy instead of my talent, my intelligence, or my work ethic? Norah's tone softened, though her words remained pointed. I'm only suggesting that your life changed dramatically because of your connection to the royal family. That's a fact, isn't it? It's your version of a fact, Meghan snapped. The truth is, that connection came at a cost most people can't imagine. Maybe instead of framing it as an advantage, you should acknowledge the trauma that came with it. The tension was now unmistakable. Even the crew behind the cameras exchanged uneasy glances. Norah took a steady breath and tried to bring the tone back down. I do understand that it wasn't easy. But Meghan, surely you can see how people might view some of your comments about the royal family as what? Meghan cut in, her tone icy. As ungrateful? As bitter? That's always the label, isn't it? The outspoken woman is ungrateful. The quiet one is a saint. I know the narrative. Norah set her pen down slowly, folding her hands on her lap. I'm not trying to label you, Meghan. I'm trying to understand you. Then maybe, Meghan said, leaning forward, you should start by listening instead of assuming. The air went cold. The politeness had officially evaporated. What had begun as a poised, polished interview was transforming into a verbal duel. Norah kept her expression steady, but her patience was beginning to erode. Meghan, meanwhile, sat back with the air of someone who believed she'd won the exchange. Neither of them realized they were only halfway through the storm. The tension in the studio had settled like fog. Every breath, every word now carried weight. The polite smiles had long since faded. What remained was a delicate balance of composure and irritation, two professionals locked in a duel they hadn't intended to fight. Norah O'Donnell took a quiet sip of water, hoping to diffuse the invisible static that seemed to hum between them. Meghan, however, sat tall and poised, one leg crossed neatly over the other, her chin lifted with quiet defiance. Norah adjusted her papers and smiled gently, trying again to pull the tone back to civility. "Let's talk about the future then," she said. "You've spoken about empowerment and using your voice to inspire others. What's next for you? More projects? Perhaps another season of your Netflix series?" Meghan's lips curved into a small, almost mocking smile. "I find it amusing that people are so concerned with what I'll do next. Maybe the world should focus less on my next move and more on what I've already accomplished." Norah nodded slightly, maintaining her calm. "Of course, but you've become a public figure whose actions and choices influence millions of people. Naturally, there's curiosity about what's to come." "Curiosity," Meghan repeated, the word dripping with disdain. "Or obsession? Because it feels more like the latter. Every time I breathe, there's an article. Every time I blink, there's a headline. I'm not a spectacle, Norah. I'm a human being." "I completely understand that," Norah replied softly, "but with influence comes scrutiny. That's the nature of public life." Meghan gave a short laugh, shaking her head. "It's easy to say that when you're on the asking side of the questions. You get to control the narrative, don't you? Ask, interpret, edit. Meanwhile, I'm left defending my existence." Norah's expression flickered for the first time. Her professionalism held, but the sting was visible in her eyes. "That's not entirely fair," she said quietly. "I'm here to have a conversation, not a confrontation." Meghan leaned back, her voice smooth but sharp. "Then perhaps you should reconsider the tone of your questions." A heavy silence followed. Even the camera operator hesitated, uncertain whether to continue rolling. But Norah didn't flinch. She'd faced storms before. Just never one wearing designer heels and an unshakable sense of entitlement. "Meghan," she said evenly, "I think it's fair to say your journey has been complicated. You've had moments of triumph and moments of controversy. There's a perception—" "Perception," Meghan interrupted, her tone slicing through the air like glass. "People love that word. They talk about perception as if it's reality, but it's not. It's manipulation, spun by tabloids and lazy reporters." Norah tilted her head. "So every story written about you is false?" "I didn't say that," Meghan replied coldly, "but most are, and the rest are twisted just enough to feed the narrative people want to believe. It's pathetic, really." Norah set down her notes entirely now, her patience wearing thin. She spoke softly, but there was steel beneath her voice. "You know, Meghan, I've interviewed world leaders, survivors, and activists who faced unimaginable pressure. But you seem determined to treat every question as an attack." Meghan's smile was slow and deliberate. "Maybe that's because every question is one." Norah blinked, genuinely surprised by the bluntness. "That's not true," she said quietly. "Isn't it?" Meghan replied. "You bring me here, pretend to be interested in my causes, and then circle back to gossip, money, and my family." "Forgive me if I don't feel honored." The tone of the conversation had shifted entirely. There was no subtlety left, no veneer of diplomacy. This was raw tension, playing out under studio lights. Norah straightened in her chair, her professionalism beginning to crack. "With respect, Meghan, these are not gossip topics. These are things you have publicly discussed. You've made statements that invite clarification." Meghan's voice dropped to a quiet, dangerous calm. "Clarification or interrogation? There's a difference, and one seeks truth, the other seeks fault. And you, Norah, seem far more interested in the latter." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The control room was silent. No one dared interrupt. Norah folded her hands on her lap, exhaling through her nose. "I think what I'm interested in is accountability," she said finally. "If you want to tell your story, that comes with questions. Fair, reasonable questions." Meghan tilted her head. "Accountability," she echoed. "That's such a convenient word. It's always thrown at women who speak out, but never at the institutions that oppress them." Norah looked at her for a long moment, the silence between them so heavy it could have cracked the walls. When she finally spoke, her tone was careful but firm. "Do you ever worry, Meghan, that your message gets lost in the way you deliver it?" Meghan's lips parted slightly. For a second, she looked genuinely caught off guard. Then the irritation returned. "Meaning what?" "Meaning," Norah said slowly, "that sometimes confidence can look like condescension. And that can make it hard for people to hear what you are actually trying to say." The room froze. Meghan's eyes darkened, her smile vanishing completely. Are you suggesting I'm arrogant? She asked, her voice low. Norah didn't move. I'm suggesting that your tone sometimes overshadows your words. Meghan let out a slow exhale, leaning back in her chair, her gaze icy. You know what's funny, Norah? When a man speaks firmly, he's called strong. When a woman does it, she's called difficult. I guess even seasoned journalists fall into that trap. It was a masterstroke of deflection, cutting, dismissive, and practiced. But this time, Norah didn't let it slide. I think strength, she said softly, also means being able to listen. Meghan's expression hardened. Then maybe you should try it sometime. The words hit like a slap. For a few unbearable seconds, neither woman spoke. The silence was electric, pulsing with restrained fury. What had started as an interview was now a battlefield, and both sides were done pretending otherwise. The studio was silent except for the faint buzz of the overhead lights, a silence so thick it seemed to swallow the air. Meghan Markle sat back in her chair, arms crossed, her chin tilted slightly upward in defiance. Norah O'Donnell, ever the picture of professionalism, remained still for several seconds, collecting herself, choosing her next words carefully. It was supposed to be a thoughtful, serious conversation. Instead, it had become a battle of wills. The crew behind the cameras exchanged nervous glances. One producer raised a hand as if to signal a break, but Norah subtly waved him off. She wasn't going to let this dissolve into chaos, not yet. She leaned forward slightly. Let's take a breath, she said softly, her voice calm but clipped. We both want this to be a fair and meaningful conversation. So let me ask you this. When you look back on everything, the royal life, the media, the documentaries, do you ever think about how it's affected the public's trust in your story? Meghan gave a short, disbelieving laugh. Trust? That's a strange word to use considering how the public has treated me. I don't owe trust to anyone, Norah. People twisted my words for years. Why would I care what they believe now? Norah nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing slightly. So you're saying it doesn't matter to you whether people believe your version of events? I'm saying, Meghan replied, voice rising slightly, that people will believe whatever they're told. That's how propaganda works. It's easy for the press to label me, to paint me as the villain, because it sells papers. And frankly, it's lazy journalism. The word lazy hung in the air like smoke. Norah's composure slipped for the first time. Her brows drew together. Her tone tightening, and I can assure you, Meghan, I take journalism very seriously. I've dedicated my life to it. Then maybe you should dedicate it to something truthful. Meghan shot back. It was the kind of remark that cut deeper than intended. The air in the studio turned heavy, charged. Norah blinked slowly, her jaw tightening before she spoke again. That's unfair, she said, the calm in her voice thinning. I've treated you with respect throughout this entire conversation. Have you? Meghan countered, leaning forward. Because from where I'm sitting, this feels more like an ambush than an interview. Every question has a hidden judgment in it. Norah's patience cracked like glass under pressure. There's no judgment here, Meghan. But when someone speaks publicly about their life, about their experiences, it's reasonable to ask questions. That's how accountability works. Meghan smiled thinly, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Accountability, again. Such a favorite word of the media. You people love holding others accountable, but not yourselves. That did it. Norah straightened in her chair, her calm professionalism dissolving into raw frustration. You know what, Meghan? Enough. I've sat here for nearly an hour trying to give you the space to tell your story, but all you've done is deflect and condescend. Every time someone tries to engage with you, it's the same thing. Everyone's against you, everyone's unfair, everyone's wrong but you. Meghan blinked, clearly stunned. For the first time all interview, she didn't have an immediate comeback. Norah's voice grew sharper, each word landing like a hammer. You talk about wanting to be understood, but you make it impossible for anyone to actually connect with you. You push away questions, you insult the people asking them, and then you wonder why people doubt your sincerity. Meghan's eyes darkened. That's not fair. No, what's not fair, Norah interrupted, is coming into a national interview and treating it like everyone owes you something. You talk about empowerment, about truth, but what I see is arrogance. You've built a brand on victimhood while refusing to take responsibility for your own words. The sound in the studio changed, the hum of equipment, the faint rustle of someone shifting behind the camera. It was as if everyone in the room had stopped breathing. Meghan's expression hardened. You have no right to speak to me that way. I have every right, Norah said firmly, when you sit in that chair and dismiss everyone who tries to ask a genuine question. You want respect? Meghan, it goes both ways. The world gave you a platform, opportunities most people will never have, and yet here you are blaming everyone but yourself. Meghan stood abruptly, the motion sharp enough to make her microphone cord pull tight. You know what, Norah? This interview is over. I won't be disrespected like this. Norah didn't move. You're walking away because you don't like being challenged. That's not strength, Meghan. That's entitlement. The words stopped Meghan in her tracks, her face flushed with a mix of anger and disbelief. Entitlement? She repeated, her voice trembling with rage. Do you have any idea what I've been through? The hate, the racism, the lies? You sit there and judge me like you know my life. I don't judge your life, Norah said quietly. I judge your behavior, right here, right now. And yes, it's entitled, because there are thousands of people who go through pain every day and don't use it to excuse cruelty. For a long moment, the two women just stared at each other, the silence deafening. Finally, Meghan tore off her microphone and threw it onto the table. This is unbelievable, she muttered, voice shaking. You people are all the same, pretending to be fair while trying to humiliate me on camera. Norah remained seated, composed once more, though her expression was unreadable. No one humiliated you, Meghan. You did that yourself. Meghan froze mid-step, her eyes widening. For a split second, something flickered behind them. Hurt, maybe even regret, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Without another word, she turned and walked off the set, her heels echoing through the empty studio. Norah exhaled deeply, leaning back in her chair. The control room was silent, the producers unsure whether to cut the feed or let it roll. Finally, Norah turned toward the nearest camera. To our viewers, she said calmly, I want to apologize for how this interview unfolded. That was not the conversation we intended to have. Sometimes, even with the best intentions, things don't go as planned. But honesty, real honesty, isn't always comfortable. Her gaze held steady on the camera for a long, quiet moment before she looked away. The lights dimmed, the recording stopped, and the room fell into silence. The interview would air in fragments the next day, headlines screaming, Markle walks off mid-interview, and Norah O'Donnell stands her ground. But those who were in the room would remember the atmosphere more than the words. Two women, two versions of power, colliding in a single unforgettable moment. What did you think of that shocking exchange? Do you think Norah went too far? Or was Meghan finally confronted with the truth? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you love dramatic real-life interviews that spiral completely out of control, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe and turn on notifications bell, because we've got even more unbelievable moments coming your way.